was pure petrol. They just not only did not have diesel technology, they just didn't have diesel in their DNA.
If you think about it, Hormazd, they've had a lot of hurdles they've stumbled over with diesels all through their history.
They had a good association with Fiat, that Fiat Multijet diesel. It kind of democratized diesel.
To borrow the phrase, cast in stone. I think the error here was cast in aluminum.
Both the Ciaz and the Ertiga didn't even have one full year of that engine, and then it was just gone. Hello and welcome to another edition of Deep Drive powered by Kotak Mahindra Prime. Now this week we have a pretty interesting topic. I'm Hormazd Sorabjee.
And I'm Sergius Barretto. And yes, we have a very interesting topic. Maruti Suzuki's very abrupt departure from diesels. Hormazd, you and I both drove their last diesel engine, which was powering the Ciaz and the Ertiga. We loved it. They very rapidly exited for some reasons that didn't quite add up, didn't they?
It didn't add up at all, Sergius. I mean, if you look at it, actually, it was a fantastic diesel, the E15A, four-cylinder, dual-mast flywheel. They really invested a lot in that engine. And, when we drove it, to be honest, I was completely blown away.
Yeah.
Let's go to a little clip of that road test we did.
This one, it's just blown me away on several fronts. For one is the refinement. In fact, it's safe to say that this is possibly amongst the most refined diesels in its class. On paper, this 1.5 engine produces a modest 95 horsepower and a healthy 225 Newton meters of torque. Now, neither figures are class best. But remember that at 1125 kilos, the Ciaz is the lightest car in its segment, and even a good 25 kilos lighter than the previous Multijet powered Ciaz. So out on the road, this engine provided enough oomph. In fact, in the dash to 100 kph, it's the fastest accelerating diesel midsizer around. Unbelievable. Not surprisingly, the 1.5 diesel promises best-in-class fuel efficiency and delivers a figure of 26.82 kilometers per litre under standard test conditions.
So as you can see, really refined engine. It really kind of was very, very competitive. And, when you're investing so much in an engine, you typically expect an engine. Engines have a much longer life than a car does.
Even a platform, yeah.
Exactly. Even a platform, it goes over multiple platforms. I mean, look what Maruti did with the F8 engine. It just went on for decades. Even the K-series engine, they've just gone on and on. And engines typically do. So to, just make an engine, when the Ciaz was launched in 2019,
and 2 months later came the Ertiga with the same diesel.
Both the Ciaz and the Ertiga didn't even have one full year of that engine, and then it was just gone. It just didn't make sense at all, because if you look at it, just imagine how that engine would have been in the Jimny, for example. I mean, it would have really given it the kind of volumes it deserved, because 70% of all Thar sales are diesel. I mean, SUVs, they need that little bit of a diesel in it. And I think, quite clearly that Maruti themselves lost market share by, let's say, getting out of diesel. They went on and said that, diesel's going to get too expensive, the diesel market is dwindling, and gave these reasons as why they really exited diesel. But, in an interview I had with Shashank Srivastava, he himself said that, they lost market share because of diesel, and they were only operating in 80% of that market. I just want to play that clip too.
In fact, we had the 50% market share in year 17, 18, 19, 19, 20 and Hormazd 2021 also. The retail market share in 2021 also was 50%.
And we know we know the fundamental reason why it dropped. The diesel went. The diesel went.
Correct. So even today, 20% is diesel, let's say 18.5%, 19%.
Yeah.
So we are operating in 80% of the market.
So clearly, I think the reasons are that, it's not just, let's say the diesel demand was still there. And a company like Maruti, they want to be in every possible segment. They are in CNG, they are in hybrids, they're coming into EVs in a big way, they are in petrol, they are in biofuels, everything. Because, when you want market share, you can't afford to ignore any segment, however small it is. I mean, it has anything above 15-20% is not small in any case. So why would they ignore that segment? And after investing so much in this engine, which I don't know the figures, but I would estimate about 1,000 crores, just to have it for 1 year to act. So should we get into that or should we rewind a bit? Because it's not just that one engine. If you think about it, almost they've had a lot of hurdles they've stumbled over with diesels all through their history. So do you want to back it up a bit? And let's get like at the start. I mean, what I'm thinking is, in the very first instance, why did Suzuki as a company not address diesels? Almost, I mean, that's a very basic maybe question, but globally speaking, I think that's a very good question, Sergius. I think that's something we need to talk about, because I think if you look at it, Suzuki from the history, what were they? They were, basically making motorbikes, then they went to small compact cars, 360cc compact cars, and they were really masters of small displacement light engines, and then to make diesels was something completely alien. It's like, I don't know, Ashok Leyland making microcars or something, they just don't have that DNA in you. So I think Suzuki also was a very small company, and they weren't as global as, let's say, Toyota was, which could also go down the diesel route for certain segments like pickups and SUVs and things like that. Suzuki was pure petrol. They just not only did not have diesel technology, they just didn't have diesel in their DNA. But clearly, again, Maruti being Maruti, they saw this huge diesel market which you just couldn't ignore. So I think that's when they started off. I think their first tryst with diesel, again, a little bit of a clumsy one, was the Zen diesel with the TUD5 engine.
Correct, the Peugeot engine. In fact, that's interesting because, they started with, they've had Peugeot, they've had Fiat, we'll get to those. Even Renault internationally, it never came to India. I think it was in the Grand Vitara that they sort of had a Renault diesel. But the Peugeot TUD5 engine, almost you're very familiar with that engine, I'm sure, because you'd have driven it in.
That's right.
Most of the cars.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, it's what made the Peugeot 309 what it was, and that time it was an amazing engine. Of course, there's no common rail back then, right. No turbocharging, naturally aspirated kind of an engine, and it was really state of the art at that time. And I think that's the engine Maruti kind of homed in on through. And I remember, I think I was told that when Mr. Bhargav went there, they're very good negotiators, which is Maruti, really try to beat that price down. But on this, PSA just did not budge. It was like a take it or leave it, because they knew this was the best engine. And I think it was a major challenge to shoehorn that a 1.5 into a Zen. Don't forget, the Zen was otherwise with a 1 liter petrol engine. And that had also been enlarged as a car from the servo mode, which was 660cc. So then they made it take a 1 liter petrol, and then on top of that, a 1.5 diesel. So really, it was a bit of a mismatch. Right. Very, very front heavy. We ran that engine. I mean, we ran that car. Interestingly, we had it as a long-termer. And I think maybe Maruti forgot about it. We really ran it till about, it did 1 lakh kilometers. I think the only long-termer which we did was 1 lakh kilometer. Engine didn't give any problem. But of course, the weight of that engine, the struts, packed up, and we were bending a lot of wheel rims at that time, all steel wheels at that time, no alloys on those cars, just because of the weight of the engine. Very, very front heavy. But what it got to show was how, I wouldn't say desperate, but how keen Maruti was to address the diesel segment and not let rivals run away. The rival being the Tata Indica.
True.
That time the Tata Indica had come out. It had a diesel engine. That was the real first solid competition in that sense to Maruti, because, you had Hyundai and you had all the other Korean manufacturers, Daewoo at that time also coming, all petrol engines, but there was no one with a diesel. Only Tata had the diesel at that time, and they wanted to compete. So I think TUD5 was then, and then of course it came in the ST fuel.
That's the bit that has always puzzled me. Like you said, it came in the Zen, and then it came in the ST. Now I remember in my previous job, while consulting with them, we would tell the whole sales network saying, hey, when it came on the Esteem, tell customers this is the same Hyundai Accent diesel, not the Zen, because, it's come from a smaller car.
Yeah.
Why didn't they just launch it in the Esteem first and then the Zen?
Well, that's an interesting point. But, when the deal was done to get the TUD5
right.
in the mid-90s, I think it came in 98. 98 was the Zen diesel, yes.
And 2002 was the Esteem.
Correct. So they would have done the deal a lot earlier, maybe 96 or 97. That time Peugeot was very much in the market. So I think think Jacques Calvé was the head of PSA at that time, and I think he said that, look, you can have the engine, but not for the S-Team because that competes with the 309. So the 309 was, the S-Team was off, no diesel for the S-Team because the 309 was there. Then in 97, Peugeot just abruptly exited.
Right.
So then I think, they got it.
So that helped, what you're saying is that helped the S-Team get the
helped the S-Team get that. So again, S-Team again looking at Maruti Suzuki looking at getting the diesel for a lot of its range, because diesel really was, let's say, that's what India ran on. I mean, we had diesel in our veins. I think in some segments we still do. Obviously, emissions, Dieselgate has completely changed the narrative. But, those were the heydays of diesel in the run-up to, I would say, into the mid 2000s, So I think that's exactly where, I think and they saw that market. That's why the whole Fiat deal as well, which was a global deal.
Yeah.
Because I think that was a good fit. They had a good association with Fiat. That Fiat Multijet diesel, it kind of democratized diesel.
Yeah, it debuted with the Swift, which was definitely, you can say, an affordable hatch. 2007, I think, is when the Swift diesel came in.
Exactly. So the Swift diesel came in, and then, I mean, you saw everyone going for that engine because it was a very localized engine. Even the injection unit was localized, the pump was localized. So it was made in huge volumes. And then you had so many, brands take that engine. I think you had GM, you had Tata, you had a whole bunch of them. Chevy, yeah.
I mean, it was also a
That's
GM.
right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. So actually, they shared that engine. So it was a joint development between GM and Fiat. Absolutely right. So I think they looked at that. In fact, GM did a 3-cylinder version for that
for the Beat.
For the Beat, if you remember. So clearly a lot. I mean,
they
wanted the diesel at that time in everything.
True, exactly.
A small car, big car. I mean, diesel, that was the heyday. And then, I think what really challenged diesels really was the emission norms, because it's much tougher to meet certain emission norms in a diesel than it is in a petrol. But I think, and Maruti really, I mean, the joke was, that, and it's true, Fiat didn't last, but the engines lasted. It's not longer.
True.
So clearly it was Maruti, selling much more diesels than Fiat was. And interestingly, the calibration, the tune, the performance in the Maruti was even better than the Fiat.
True.
So really, they had really aced that. I think that was the heyday. They were making, I think the delta price between a petrol and a diesel was about 1,20,000 at that time.
Yeah.
So despite the license fees being paid to Fiat, they really made a lot of money in that. Went to the Desire, it went in the Ciaz, it went into a lot of cars at that time.
No, you're right. You're right. It was a joke because that engine was stretched out for so long. I mean, when it came out in 2005, I think it won the 2005 International Engine of the Year award in its category. For all the local marketing materials, we use that logo everywhere. International Engine of the Year, 2005, 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10. After about 7, 10 years, 15 years, you still have that logo from 10 years ago saying Engine of the Year. It didn't make sense. We actually had to drop that logo saying, it's sort of award worth.
But it just drives my point home that, the longevity of engines is just phenomenal. As long as you can get them to upgrade them to the new emission norms, you can continue using them for on and on. And, and I think, but I think at some point, Suzuki realized that, with diesel, they need to get into it themselves, because diesel being, so important, in the mid-2000s, 2015 and all, really at its peak at that time, 2014. Yeah, again, just before Dieselgate, before the whole thing exploded, what Volkswagen did and suddenly gave diesel a bad name. And that was dovetailed with jumping from BS4 to BS6 in 4 years, which again put a lot of pressure on diesel engines. And, a lot of them went out of the market. But before that, I think there was a strategy to make a whole family of in-house diesel engines. And in an interview with Osamu Suzuki, which I was very fortunate to, be present for, he actually confirmed that they were making a 2 and even a 3-cylinder version of the engine, and then eventually the 4-cylinder. So this would be a 2-cylinder, which was there in the scenario.
Where it debuted, their first ever
and quite really a very disappointing engine. There was to be a 3-cylinder, which never happened.
True.
And then they jumped straight to the 4-cylinders. And that's why before I drove the Ciaz, I was very skeptical because, we had the 2-cylinder scenario as a reference and a benchmark.
Correct.
And
That was a terrible one.
and it really wasn't great. So, and then suddenly when you drive the Ciaz 1.5, I was just, as you saw the clip,
I
was just completely blown away.
I don't know if you remember, we picked up the car in Delhi the first time we sampled
that's
it.
right.
We both sat, and I remember both of us just looked at each other, totally stunned.
NVH was superb, dual mass flywheels, obviously you get a lot of benefit. As I said, they spent a lot of money on that, but clearly there was one major technical flaw,
True.
which Maruti Suzuki hasn't confirmed. And, we've done a story on this 2 years back. So really this is quite an old topic, but, it's just interesting to give perspective on engine development. That the flaw was in the E15 cylinder head, which we have right over here.
Right.
Yeah.
So Hormazd, I mean, this engine, as you said, it was fantastic. The 4-cylinder version, not the 2-cylinder version. The 2-cylinder version also, I mean, apart from the flaw that I know you're going to show us, there's also, I think, another flaw in the sense that it was aluminium. Yes, they wanted to chase weight, but aluminium doesn't dampen vibrations in NVH, right?
But this engine had good NVH.
This one was. The 2-cylinder, do you think that was the problem?
Well, I think 2 cylinders inherently.
So it's inherently
because
imbalanced.
if you look at it, the Honda diesel also was,
Is also aluminium.
and it was a noisy engine. But they had really managed the NVH really well.
You're right.
They had really done a good job. So that's why it came as a fantastic surprise. And in fact, the story we had done right here. In fact, you can see, what we're going to get into right now. This is done actually about 2 years back. We just kept it in the magazine, but I think it's interesting that we talk about it.
No,
right now.
absolutely. In fact, so why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, so I think basically the flaw is in the cylinder head.
Right.
Now, what they have done, this is an integrated exhaust manifold. Now integrated exhaust manifolds, what it is basically is, you got the water jacket, everything over here. The exhaust manifold is part of the cylinder head. The advantage basically of that, there's a lot of things apart from weight and rigidity and all that is, it also, cools the exhaust gases. So the exhaust gases are cooled by the water jacket, and there's a big advantage in petrol engines, especially a lot of petrol engines. This is a trend which has been around for a long time. Even the VW TSI has it. It really cools the exhaust gases. Now, when you cool the exhaust gases, you get a lot of benefits. Even fuel efficiency is a benefit, because otherwise, with hot exhaust gases, you have to inject rich fuel to kind of, cool down the exhaust for the catalytic converters so it doesn't get damaged. But instead of injecting fuel, always is, you're just wasting fuel in cooling something when it could have been used in combustion. So clearly, that's one of the things. But the key thing is that in a diesel, other 1.5s, they don't have an integrated exhaust manifold. They have the stand. You see the 1.5 Hyundai engines, you see the 1.5 Mahindra engine, you see the Tata 1.5 engine. They do not use an integrated exhaust manifold. The diesels do not use this integrated exhaust manifold. And the fundamental reason for that is because diesel exhaust is inherently cooler than petrol. About 200 degrees Celsius cooler. I think it's 800, 600, something like that. But I'm not sure on the numbers. But the point is, it runs much cooler than the petrol. Now, it's fine in BS4, which was fine. We drove it. There was no problem. But when you go to BS6, you have more complex hardware. So in BS4, you just had like a DOC, a diesel oxidation catalyst. But in this, you have a complex diesel particulate filter and a DOC together. And that's where the problem is. Because if the gases are too cool, they get liquefied in the DPF and the DOC rather being in gaseous form. And when there are liquid, it doesn't pass through the substrate, the fine substrate that easily. Also, during regeneration, the substrate can take about 1,000 degrees Celsius with the gas. But if there's liquid over there, that will combust and shoot the temperature up even more to beyond 1,300. So, it could cause, a crack in the DPF and have reliability issues. So this was fundamentally the flaw, that the DPF, was basically not working with such cool gases. So that was basically the issue. And then, there were some cases we heard that Maruti may come back into, there were some stories on it, newspaper reports had done that Maruti may come back into diesel later for 6.2. I think they were trying desperately, obviously, to re-engineer the whole cylinder head was going to be very expensive. One way could be to, electrically heat DPF and stuff like that, which to make up, compensate for the cooler exhaust gases. But again, all that is cost. So I think then, you have and besides you have a very small window because BS6 was April 2020. And then you had BS 6.2 in April 2023, which would have then meant going into a urea tank. I don't know whether, Maruti wanted to do that. So they missed that window and now it doesn't make sense going into diesel. But just imagine if they had this diesel going in BS 6, the Brezza could have had it.
Correct.
Even the Jimny could have had it. And, who knows, maybe even their bigger, Grand Vitara could have had it. And Toyota could have also used that engine, which they didn't get to use.
Correct.
So I think, clearly this is really what happened was that, the design of the cylinder head from a BS6 perspective just didn't work. I mean, it was not going to work at all. So I think that was the fundamental issue why they really got out of it. And, it's, but I think having said that, Maruti being Maruti, they've really kind of, I wouldn't say dodged a bullet, but they did lose a bit of market share, but they've come back so much stronger with looking at all other alternative powertrains, very efficient petrols, the CNG, the hybrid. So really, I think in that way, you've got to hand it to them for, let's say,
for this
because
mistake.
You look at the other, for this mistake, this was an absolute mistake.
This is like, I think to borrow the phrase, cast in stone. I think the error here was cast in aluminium.
Yeah, cast in aluminium.
They just can't get it. And in fact, for our viewers, as Hormazd was saying, it's an integrated exhaust manifold. If you look under the bonnet of your car, on other engine examples, you'll notice each cylinder has a separate exhaust coming out into a manifold, into a common area there, right? It's cast within.
Correct.
So
exactly. Yeah.
As you said, I guess expensive re-engineering.
Yeah, expensive re-engineering. But again, I want to say that, they kind of got away with it. In fact, Maruti is getting stronger in many ways. And if you look at other companies which exited diesel, they've really never recovered from it. Renault Nissan being one. I mean, the end of the K9K really kind of, killed certain models of that. VW Group, again, they have got volumes, but really they're missing out on not having the diesel. I think even company like Fiat, the fact that, their diesels went, they couldn't be upgraded. I think the whole brand went as a result of that because they really didn't have anything suitable. So I think it's interesting. And but again, so I think this is a story that, I thought is interesting to understand, that why Maruti really missed out on a big opportunity in diesel, but they have made up with other powertrains. But, at the end of the day, it just goes to show that, some things are in the DNA of the company and some things are not.
True, absolutely. So Hormazd, is this then the chapter closed, final, nail in the coffin for diesel and Suzuki?
Absolutely. I think for anyone out of diesel now, it's too late. The boat has sailed. No one's going to get back into diesel in 2024. I think those people who have diesel, they'll continue pushing them along because there's definitely a sizable market still for it. I mean, even something which may have gone from 70% to 40%, even to 25-30%, that's still a sizable number. And with no other competition, people are willing to play in that space. But they are clearly diesel, not an easy fuel to work with. I mean, there are a lot of challenges, especially on emissions, because they've got this bad boy image, which they've always had for a long time, fundamentally to do with NOx and particulates. And again, the whole DPF was to trap the particulate filter, and also BS6 was to lower the NOx. Which again, all engines had to meet, and that's why it required sophisticated hardware. Which I think
CO2 they are better though. Interesting.
Yeah, CO2 they are better. They are better. But anyway,
just to give them a little.
But having said that, Maruti is done well on CO2 with its existing petrol engines and with the hybrids and with the CNG. So I think that way they've come out well. But I think if anyone, if next time Maruti says they pulled out of diesel because there was no market for it, that's absolutely not true. It's because actually they'd made a mistake. So I hope you enjoyed this session of Deep Drive. Stay tuned and see you again next Saturday at 11 a.m.